I never thought a simple act of kindness would change my life forever. My name's Sarah, and I own a small cafe in the heart of downtown. Every morning, I'd walk past this homeless man on my way to work. He always had a kind smile, despite his rough appearance. One rainy day, as I hurried to open the cafe, I saw him huddled under a flimsy cardboard box. Something in me snapped. I couldn't just walk by anymore. Without thinking, I called out, "Hey, do you want a job?" His eyes lit up, and he nodded eagerly. Little did I know, this split-second decision would lead to an incredible transformation, not just for him, but for my entire business. Stick around to hear how this simple offer turned into something I never could have imagined. Trust me, you won't believe what happened next. The man's name was Mike. When he showed up at the cafe that first day, I'll admit, I was nervous. His clothes were tattered, and he hadn't showered in who knows how long. But there was something in his eyes, a spark of determination that made me want to give him a chance. I started him off small, washing dishes and cleaning tables. To my surprise, Mike threw himself into the work with incredible enthusiasm. He arrived early, stayed late, and never complained. As the days went by, I noticed something changing. The other staff members, who were initially wary, started to warm up to Mike. His positive attitude was infectious, and soon the whole atmosphere of the cafe felt different, lighter, more joyful. But the real shock came when I overheard Mike talking to a customer about coffee. His knowledge was impressive, to say the least. When I asked him about it, he revealed he used to work as a barista years ago, before life took a tough turn. That's when I had an idea. What if I trained Mike to be more than just a cleaner? Could this homeless man become the key to transforming my struggling cafe? Over the next few weeks, I worked closely with Mike, teaching him everything I knew about running the cafe. To my amazement, he soaked up the information like a sponge. Soon, he was coming up with ideas I'd never even considered. One day, Mike suggested we try a new blend of coffee. I was hesitant. We'd been using the same supplier for years. But he was so passionate about it, I decided to give it a shot. The results were incredible. Customers couldn't get enough of our new signature blend. Word spread quickly, and soon we had lines out the door every morning. But it wasn't just the coffee that was drawing people in. Mike had a way with customers that I'd never seen before. He remembered everyone's names, their usual orders, and always had a kind word or joke to share. People started coming to the cafe not just for the great coffee, but for the warm, welcoming atmosphere Mike had created. As business boomed, I found myself relying on Mike more and more. He seemed to have a natural talent for management, and I felt comfortable leaving him in charge for longer periods. That's when I decided to take a leap of faith. I'd been putting off a much-needed vacation for years, always worried about leaving the cafe. But now, with Mike at the helm, I felt confident enough to take 2 weeks off. Little did I know, those 2 weeks would lead to the biggest surprise of my life. When I returned from my vacation, I almost walked past my own cafe. The place was unrecognizable. The drab exterior had been repainted in warm, inviting colors. New, stylish signage adorned the front, and potted plants lined the entrance. Inside, the transformation was even more dramatic. The old, mismatched furniture had been replaced with cozy, rustic tables and chairs. Local artwork hung on the freshly painted walls, and the air was filled with the aroma of freshly baked pastries, something we'd never offered before. But the biggest change was the energy of the place. The cafe was packed, buzzing with lively conversation and laughter. Behind the counter, I saw Mike, confidently directing a team of baristas, his smile as bright as ever. When he saw me, he rushed over, beaming with pride. "Welcome back, Sarah. What do you think?" I was speechless. In just 2 weeks, Mike had turned my struggling cafe into the hottest spot in town. As he excitedly showed me around, explaining all the changes he'd made, I felt tears welling up in my eyes. This man, who I'd first met as a homeless stranger on the street, had not only transformed my business but had also found his own path to redemption. In giving Mike a chance, I'd gained so much more than just an employee. I'd found a partner, a friend, and a reminder of the incredible power of kindness and second chances. As I looked around at the thriving cafe, filled with happy customers and staff, I realized that sometimes the greatest transformations come from the most unexpected places. All it takes is a willingness to open your heart and take a chance on someone. So, the next time you pass by someone in need, remember Mike's story. You never know. Your simple act of kindness might just change both of your lives forever. The success of our cafe brought new challenges. With our increased popularity, we were struggling to keep up with demand. Long lines and wait times were starting to frustrate our customers, and I could see the stress wearing on Mike and our staff. One particularly hectic morning, I overheard a customer complaining about the wait. My heart sank. Had our success become our downfall? But then, I saw Mike approach the disgruntled customer. With his characteristic warmth and charm, he not only diffused the situation but turned it into a positive experience. I watched in awe as the customer left with a smile, promising to return. That evening, after closing, Mike and I sat down to brainstorm. We needed to find a way to maintain our quality and atmosphere while serving more customers. It was Mike who came up with the solution. "What if we expand?" he suggested, eyes gleaming with excitement. "The space next door has been vacant for months. We could knock down the wall, double our seating, and add a quick service counter for to-go orders." It was a bold idea, and frankly, it terrified me. The cafe was already more successful than I'd ever dreamed. Did we really need to take such a big risk? But as I looked at Mike, I remembered the risk I took when I first offered him a job. That leap of faith had paid off beyond my wildest expectations. Maybe it was time to take another one. Little did I know, this decision would lead us down an unexpected path, one that would change not just our cafe, but our entire community. As we began planning our expansion, Mike had another idea that would prove to be transformative. "Sarah," he said one day, "what if we use this opportunity to help others like me?" Mike proposed that we partner with local shelters and rehabilitation programs to offer job training and employment opportunities to people trying to get back on their feet. At first, I was hesitant. Running a business was hard enough without adding a social mission to the mix. But Mike was passionate about the idea. "Think about it," he said. "If one person taking a chance on me led to all this, imagine what we could do if we extended that chance to others." His words struck a chord. We decided to give it a try, starting small with just 2 trainees from a local shelter. The results were remarkable. Like Mike, our new team members brought unique perspectives and a drive to succeed that energized the whole cafe. Customers loved hearing their stories and feeling like they were part of something bigger than just grabbing a cup of coffee. Word of our initiative spread, and soon we were being featured in local news stories. The publicity brought in even more customers, many of whom told us they chose our cafe specifically because of our mission. As our business grew, so did our impact. We expanded our training program, partnering with more organizations and even offering classes in barista skills, customer service, and basic business management. But the most rewarding part was seeing the transformations in our trainees. Like Mike, many of them blossomed in their roles, regaining confidence and purpose. Some moved on to other jobs, while others became permanent members of our team. Our little cafe had become more than just a business. It was a beacon of hope, a place where second chances weren't just given, but celebrated. A year after our expansion, Mike and I stood outside the cafe, admiring the bustling scene inside. The place was thriving, filled with a diverse mix of customers and staff, all brought together by great coffee and a shared belief in the power of community. As we chatted, a man approached us. He looked nervous, his clothes worn and his eyes downcast. With a start, I realized he reminded me of Mike when I first met him. Before I could say anything, Mike stepped forward. "Can I help you?" he asked kindly. The man hesitated, then spoke softly. I've heard you might be hiring. I know I don't look like much, but I'm a hard worker. I just need a chance." Mike and I exchanged a glance, both of us fighting back tears. In that moment, everything had come full circle. Mike put his hand on the man's shoulder. "Come on in," he said warmly. "Let's talk over a cup of coffee. I think you'll fit in just fine here." As I watched them walk into the cafe together, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. What had started as a simple act of kindness had grown into something far beyond anything I could have imagined. Our cafe wasn't just serving coffee anymore. We were serving hope, one cup at a time. And in doing so, we'd created something truly special, a place where everyone, regardless of their past, could find a warm welcome and a fresh start. I realized then that success isn't just about profits or popularity. It's about the lives you touch and the positive change you create in the world. And by that measure, our little cafe was the most successful business I could ever have hoped for. As I joined Mike and our potential new team member inside, I couldn't help but smile. Who knew what new adventures and transformations awaited us? One thing was certain, I couldn't wait to find out. Just when we thought everything was going smoothly, life threw us a curveball. One morning, I arrived at the cafe to find a notice from the health department taped to our door. Apparently, someone had filed a complaint about our hiring practices, claiming we were putting customers at risk by employing people from the streets. My heart sank. We'd worked so hard to build something positive, and now it felt like it was all crumbling down. I could see the fear in the eyes of our staff, many of whom had come to us from difficult backgrounds. They were worried about losing the stability they'd fought so hard to achieve. Mike, however, remained calm. "We've done nothing wrong," he said firmly. "We've followed all the regulations. This is just a misunderstanding. We'll get through this." His confidence gave me strength. We decided to face the challenge head-on. We invited the health inspector to come and see our operation firsthand. We showed them our rigorous training programs, our spotless kitchen, and introduced them to our dedicated staff. To our relief, the inspector was impressed. Not only did we pass the inspection with flying colors, but they also commended us for our social initiative. The complaint was dismissed, and we even received a letter of apology from the health department. This experience taught us an important lesson. No matter how good your intentions, there will always be obstacles. But with perseverance and transparency, you can overcome them and come out even stronger. News of our victory over the health department complaint spread quickly. To our surprise, it generated even more positive publicity for the cafe. People were inspired by our commitment to our mission in the face of adversity. One day, a woman in a sharp business suit came into the cafe. She introduced herself as the CEO of a large coffee chain. I braced myself, thinking she might be scoping us out as competition. Instead, she had an offer that left us speechless. "I've been following your story," she said. "What you're doing here is remarkable. We'd like to implement a similar program across our stores nationwide. Would you be willing to consult with us?" Mike and I were stunned. This was an opportunity to expand our impact beyond anything we'd imagined. But it also meant potentially helping our biggest competitor. We asked for time to think it over. After much discussion, we decided to accept the offer. Our mission had always been about creating positive change, and this was a chance to do that on a massive scale. Over the next few months, Mike and I traveled to different cities, helping the coffee chains set up their own version of our program. It was challenging work, but incredibly rewarding to see our idea taking root in communities across the country. As our consultancy work wound down, Mike and I found ourselves at a crossroads. Our cafe was still thriving, but we both felt a pull towards something bigger. One evening, as we were closing up, Mike turned to me with a glint in his eye. "Sarah," he said, "what if we wrote a book?" I laughed, thinking he was joking, but he was serious. "Think about it," he continued. "We could share our story, inspire others to take chances on people, maybe even provide a blueprint for other businesses to follow." The idea took hold. We spent the next year writing, reliving our journey from that first rainy day to where we were now. It wasn't easy. We had to be vulnerable, sharing our fears and mistakes along with our successes. But it was also incredibly cathartic. When Brewing Hope, How a Cup of Coffee Changed Our Community, hit the shelves, we were unprepared for the response. The book became a bestseller, and suddenly we were being invited to speak at conferences and on TV shows. Our little cafe had sparked a movement. All across the country, businesses were starting to look at hiring differently, seeing the potential in people who needed a second chance. 5 years after I first offered Mike a job, we stood together at a podium, preparing to give a keynote speech at a national business conference. The topic, social entrepreneurship, changing lives, one job at a time. As I looked out at the sea of faces, I saw business owners, corporate executives, and young entrepreneurs, all eager to learn how they could make a difference in their communities. I turned to Mike, remembering the man I'd first met on the street. He'd come so far and brought so many others along with him. He caught my eye and smiled, and I knew he was thinking the same thing. As we began our speech, I felt a surge of hope. Our journey had been full of unexpected twists and turns, challenges and triumphs. But through it all, one thing remained constant: the power of giving someone a chance. We may have started by brewing coffee, but what we'd really created was a recipe for change. And as I looked out at the audience, I knew our story was far from over. In fact, it felt like we were just getting started. Who knew what the next chapter would bring? Whatever it was, I was certain of one thing: it would be an adventure worth taking, one cup of coffee at a time. As our influence grew, so did the demands on our time. Between running the cafe, consulting for other businesses, and speaking engagements, Mike and I were stretched thin. We knew something had to change, but we weren't sure what. Then, one sunny afternoon, a sleek black car pulled up outside the cafe. A woman in an impeccable suit stepped out. It was the mayor of our city. She walked in, ordered a latte, and asked to speak with us privately. "I've been following your work," she said, her eyes twinkling, "and I have a proposition for you both. How would you like to head up a new city initiative? We want to create a program that helps small businesses hire and train people from disadvantaged backgrounds. Your cafe would be the model." Mike and I exchanged glances. It was an incredible opportunity, but it would mean stepping away from the day-to-day operations of the cafe. Were we ready for that? "We'll need some time to think about it," I said. The mayor nodded understandingly. "Of course. But remember, you two have already changed so many lives. Imagine what you could do with the resources of an entire city behind you." As she left, Mike and I sat in silence, both lost in thought. Our little cafe had started a movement bigger than we ever imagined. Was it time to take the next step? After much discussion and soul-searching, Mike and I decided to accept the mayor's offer. It wasn't an easy decision. The cafe was our baby, after all. But we realized that to truly make a difference, we needed to think bigger. We spent weeks training our staff to take over. Jamie, a former trainee who'd become one of our best baristas, would take over as manager. Seeing the pride in her eyes as we handed over the keys, I knew we'd made the right choice. Our first day at City Hall was surreal. We had an office with a view of the city skyline, a far cry from the cozy confines of our cafe. But as we dove into the work, creating programs and partnerships, we felt that same spark of excitement we'd had when we first expanded the cafe. We named our initiative Grounds for Change, a nod to our coffee shop roots. The program provided tax incentives for businesses that hired and trained people from shelters, rehabilitation programs, and underprivileged neighborhoods. We also set up a mentorship network, pairing experienced business owners with new entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. As Grounds for Change took off, we faced new challenges. Some business owners were resistant, worried about the risks of hiring people with troubled pasts. Others tried to take advantage of the tax breaks without providing real opportunities. We quickly learned that changing minds was even harder than changing lives. But we persevered, sharing success stories and working closely with businesses to address their concerns. One day, a local news station ran a story about a tech startup that had hired several people through our program. The CEO spoke about how these employees, with their unique perspectives and determination, had actually improved the company's products and culture. The story went viral, and suddenly businesses were lining up to participate. We were making real progress, but with it came growing pains. Long hours, complex logistics, and the pressure of public scrutiny began to take their toll. About a year into the program, Mike and I were exhausted. We'd achieved so much, but we felt like we were losing touch with the personal connections that had made our cafe special. Then, one evening, as we were leaving City Hall, we decided to stop by the cafe for old time's sake. As we walked in, the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of laughter washed over us. Jamie greeted us with a big smile, proudly showing us the day's sales figures, the best ever. As we sat at our old table, sipping our favorite brews, we watched the bustling scene. Every staff member was someone who'd come through our program, now confidently serving customers and supporting each other. At that moment, a young woman timidly approached Jamie. She looked nervous, her clothes a bit worn. We overheard her asking about job opportunities. Without missing a beat, Jamie smiled warmly and said, "Why don't we sit down and chat over a cup of coffee?" I think you'll fit in just fine here. Mike and I looked at each other, tears welling in our eyes. This was why we'd started all this. The cafe wasn't just surviving without us. It was thriving and continuing our mission. We realized then that our work at City Hall, while important, had distanced us from the heart of what we'd set out to do. It was time for another change. The next day, Mike and I met with the mayor. We explained our decision to step down from our positions and return to grassroots work. To our surprise, she understood completely. You two have laid an incredible foundation, she said. Now it's time for the city to build on it. But we'll always need people like you on the ground, showing us the way. With her blessing, we transitioned out of our roles, helping to select and train our replacements. Then, we turned our attention back to what we loved most, working directly with people, one cup of coffee at a time. We didn't go back to running the cafe. Jamie was doing an amazing job, and we didn't want to disrupt that. Instead, we started a new project, a mobile coffee truck that would travel to shelters and underprivileged neighborhoods, offering free coffee and job training information. We called it the Hope Brew Express, and it quickly became a symbol of opportunity in the community. People would line up not just for the free coffee, but for the chance to talk to us about changing their lives. As I stood beside our colorful truck one morning, handing out steaming cups and warm smiles, I caught Mike's eye. We both grinned, knowing that this, right here, connecting with people, offering hope with each cup, this was where we belonged. Our journey had taken us from a small cafe to City Hall and back again. But in the end, we'd found that the biggest changes often start with the smallest gestures. A cup of coffee, a kind word, a chance. Sometimes that's all it takes to change a life, and maybe even a whole community. And as the sun rose over the city, promising a new day full of possibilities, I knew our story was far from over. In fact, it felt like we were brewing up a whole new beginning. As the Hope Brew Express became a familiar sight around the city, we started noticing something extraordinary. Other businesses were following our lead, creating their own mobile outreach programs. A bakery started a Dough for Dreams truck, offering pastries and baking classes. A tech company launched a Code on Wheels bus, providing basic computer training. Our little idea had sparked a movement. The streets that once seemed cold and unwelcoming were now buzzing with opportunities. But with this success came new challenges. One rainy afternoon, as we were serving coffee outside a shelter, a man approached us. His eyes were filled with a mix of hope and desperation. "I've been to every one of these trucks," he said, his voice shaking. "I've taken classes, gotten certificates, but no one will hire me. I have a criminal record." His words hit us hard. We'd been so focused on providing opportunities that we'd overlooked a crucial barrier many people faced. It was time to tackle this issue head-on. Mike and I spent weeks researching and reaching out to our network. We learned about Ban the Box initiatives and companies that actively hired people with criminal records. We also discovered that many businesses were hesitant not out of prejudice, but out of uncertainty about legal and insurance issues. We decided to host a summit, bringing together business owners, legal experts, and successful employees with past convictions. The event was tense at first, with a lot of skepticism in the room. But as people shared their stories and experts addressed concerns, we could see mindsets starting to shift. By the end of the day, several businesses had committed to changing their hiring policies. A local factory owner even stood up and offered jobs on the spot to 3 attendees with records. It wasn't a complete solution, but it was a start. We left the summit feeling energized and ready to push this initiative further. Just as we were gaining momentum, disaster struck. A man who had been hired through one of the new initiatives was arrested for theft at his workplace. The news spread quickly, and suddenly all our progress seemed to be unraveling. Businesses that had been open to second-chance hiring were now backing away. The mayor's office was flooded with complaints. Even some of our strongest supporters were questioning whether we'd gone too far. Mike and I were devastated. Had we been naive? Had our desire to help blinded us to the risks? As we sat in the cafe, grappling with these questions, Jamie approached our table. "You can't give up," she said firmly. "One setback doesn't erase all the good you've done. Remember why you started this in the first place." Her words were a much-needed wake-up call. We realized that change was never easy, and setbacks were part of the process. It was how we responded to them that mattered. Instead of retreating, we decided to face the issue head-on. We organized a town hall meeting, inviting everyone, from business owners to program participants, from skeptics to supporters. The meeting was tense, with heated arguments and painful testimonies. But as people spoke, a theme emerged. Everyone, regardless of their background, wanted the same thing: a safe community with opportunities for all. We listened to the concerns and worked together to develop solutions. We created a more comprehensive support system for employees transitioning back into the workforce, including counseling and mentorship. We also established a network of businesses committed to fair chance hiring, who could share best practices and support each other. Slowly but surely, trust began to rebuild. Businesses started hiring again, this time with more robust systems in place. The man who had been arrested even spoke at one of our events, taking full responsibility for his actions and urging others not to squander their second chances. A year after the setback, Mike and I stood on a stage, addressing a crowd at the city's annual Business Awards ceremony. We had just received an award for Most Impactful Community Initiative. As I looked out at the audience, I saw familiar faces: Jamie, now running 3 cafes of her own; the factory owner who had offered jobs at our first summit; even the mayor, beaming with pride. But the faces that moved me most were the new ones. People who had come through our programs, now business owners themselves, creating opportunities for others. I turned to Mike, remembering the day I first offered him a job. We'd come so far from that rainy morning, yet in many ways, we'd come full circle. We were still in the business of serving coffee and second chances, just on a much larger scale. As we raised our award, I felt a surge of hope. Our journey had been filled with ups and downs, triumphs and setbacks. But through it all, we'd stayed true to our belief in the power of opportunity and the strength of community. Looking out at the sea of faces, all part of this incredible story we'd written together, I knew that the best chapters were still to come. Because when you brew hope, there's no limit to how far its aroma can spread. Just when we thought our journey couldn't get any more surprising, we received an email that left us speechless. It was from the United Nations, inviting us to speak at a global conference on sustainable urban development and social entrepreneurship. Mike and I were overwhelmed. Our little cafe experiment had started as a local initiative, grew into a citywide movement, and was now being recognized on an international stage. It was both exciting and terrifying. As we prepared for the conference, we reflected on our journey. We weren't just going to share a success story. We were going to share a roadmap for change that could potentially impact communities around the world. The day of the conference arrived. As we stood backstage, waiting to be introduced, I felt a flutter of nerves. Mike squeezed my hand reassuringly. "Remember," he said, "we're just telling our story. The story of a cup of coffee that changed everything." As we walked onto the stage, facing an audience of global leaders and changemakers, I took a deep breath. We started at the beginning, that rainy day when I offered Mike a job. We shared our triumphs and our failures, the lessons we learned, and the lives that were changed. The response was overwhelming. People were moved to tears, inspired by the simplicity and power of our approach. During the